Right, where to start? Your wrists are so integral to a powerful, smooth flowing motion. They create power in the swing, they create leverage, they largely control what happens with the club face and the club delivery. They also create balance in the swing. A swing that does not have good wrist motion will inevitably be overworking the body to try and create any power. So understanding the motion of the wrists is absolutely key. So in this video, we're going to keep it really simple. We'll go through the basic model of the arms and wrists in the swing, and also some of the key things to avoid. Right, let's keep this in context. What I'm about to show is a really solid model for almost every golfer, certainly 95% of golfers. I appreciate that there are amazing players who do things differently and have their own kind of wrist adaptations. Let's not geek out on this. Let's not fill the comments box with all the examples of the unicorns, if you like. This is a really solid model that will help almost every golfer. First up then, what do the wrists do in the swing? I mean, we have three kind of planes of motion available to us, two kind of and another one. So essentially the wrist can move up and down. So I'm going to call this hinge. You'll hear it in anatomical speak as radial and ulnar deviation. There's a radial and ulnar bone in your body. We're going to call it wrist hinge, up and down, really powerful. If you were going to split a log, you would use your wrists heavily in that way. We also have wrist extension and flexion. So you see it's very, very cupped in that manner. So that's extension and that's flexion. And you'll notice as one, because the way we're holding the club, as one wrist flexes, the other one extends, and there's that relationship that goes on. And the third plane of motion is actually more what the forearms do, which is to rotate. So if I did nothing with my hands there and just rotated my forearms, that's what I'd get. Often referred to as supination or supination and pronation. For you and I, forearm rotation. And with my hands on the club then, we have wrist hinge, so up and down, really, really powerful. That goes on in the swing. We have the forearm rotation, so if I hinge my wrists up and rotate my forearms, that's that sort of windscreen wiper move. And you can see as I blend those two together, that starts to look like a golf swing. And then the flexion extension with my hands on the club is more this way, as opposed to twisting the club around its own axis. That wants to be kept to an absolute minimum. And the swing is essentially a blend of all three of those. And if we just kind of understand that we don't want a heavy dominance of anything, then I think that would be a good place to start. So let's have a think about this. The motion of the backswing then is going to be some wrist hinge. As your arms lift, there'll be some wrist hinge, and I'm looking for the appropriate amount to be about 90 degrees. And that's not an anatomical reference. I'm talking about the reference I would use, but is 90 degrees between the club shaft and the lead arm. Meanwhile, the arms are rotating. So if I take the ball here with the line on it, as I turn back, my arms have rotated enough so that you can now only see the blue side. And as I come through, my body turns as well. You'll only see the yellow side. So backswing would look like this. And that is my arms rotating a little bit. Now, while that's going on, there is a subtle amount of wrist motion this way. So my trail wrist extending, so that at the top of the swing, the left wrist would be relatively similar to how it started. So what that looks like with my wrist on the handle then is, if I start with my hands on the handle like so, that's just my starting grip, you can see there's a cupping nature to that left wrist. And of course, how much that is cupped depends on how strong your grip is. So a really strong grip would have a large cupping, a weak grip, very little. But standard neutral grip looks like that. And at the top of the swing, we've hinged the wrist 90 degrees, and we want to, if we get to there at the top, that's pretty good. Slightly flatter would be better. And if this flattens, that one then extends a little bit. So those two work in harmony, don't they? So that would be ideal. What we don't want to do, we definitely don't want this wrist extending. That is really bad news. Open face, fat shots, slices. But equally, we don't want the wrist kind of heavily working that way. Although I appreciate some amazing players do it that way. So having made that motion in the backswing, arms have lifted, wrists have hinged a bit. they're rotated. It is the opposite in the way down and through. So the arms pull down, the body turns, and then you can see in the through swing my wrists have moved up again as the arms have turned. I know, and before you say it, I appreciate that at impact the club needs to be leaning forwards with an iron, more so with a short iron, and that in itself means that the wrists have been pulled into this kind of an alignment, left wrist flat, right wrist more extended, but it is more the drive on the handle and the positioning of the handle that creates that, so it pulls the wrists into alignment as opposed to the wrists kind of working hard to actually deliver it. So here's a toy that I often use to get that sense of how we pull and we swoosh the club. This is I don't know what it's called, something about lag I'd imagine, but essentially it highlights that need to hinge the wrists a little bit, and then you pull and then rehinge the wrists on the other side, and that gives us that lovely swoosh. So common patterns to be avoided then. Well, I think first of all, being very stiff and controlling. This sense of really kind of holding the handle tightly and doing not much with the wrists. It feels like it should control the club more. Actually, you're going to have a lack of speed and just have to create that speed elsewhere in the body, as we said in the introduction. The opposite of that, so being too reliant on your wrists and hands to create speed, well, that will create impact issues, club face issues, low point issues. That's not good either. So we're after 90-degree wrist hinge, and then to be pulling, unhinging and turning through in a really kind of smooth and coordinated fashion. Probably most common, and if you have low point issues and are a slicer, then this is a key pattern to be avoided, and that is where the wrists have hinged in the backswing, but also you've got the wrist going the wrong way. So the lead wrist is extended. I'll show you down here. So the lead wrist would look like that with this cupping nature, and you can see how the club face is open, i.e. the toe of the club is pointing down now, as opposed to something more like that, where there's a very slight cupping and the face is more at this kind of angle than this one. Interestingly, if you put your lead hand on the club and try and get maximum hinge out of your wrist, so this angle becomes really acute, you'll notice how extended that wrist is. If you put your finger here, as you try and flatten the wrist, you'll see how that puts a force sending the club away from you, like so. And that's not me trying to unhinge, it's me trying to flatten the wrist. So essentially, the wrist cannot be in maximum hinge or radial deviation and have that kind of flattened position here. So what does that mean? It means if in the backswing you have really kind of tried to hinge your wrists a lot, then almost inevitably you're going to have too much extension of the wrists and that open face. And the last really common pattern is just a whole kind of lack of release of the club through the balls. So I'd be looking for, if that's our L shape in the backswing, our 90 degrees, I'd be looking for something similar in the through swing. I mean, I wouldn't be, overly particular about this, but I do want to see some kind of pull and swoosh and release of the wrists, as opposed to an overly dragged handle which comes in many different forms, where the wrists kind of do nothing. I mean, that is a misbalance. So what I'm looking at there is the line between my right arm and the club, you'll see, is very straight there, as opposed to enabling the club head to pass me, and therefore the wrist to be a little bit more active. So there we go. We have a little bit of up and down, we have a little bit of arm rotation as the body turns, and within that there's a subtle amount of flexion and extension. And in my next video, we're going to have a look at this device, which helps us measure and develop the correct wrist action. We'll have a look at this popular device as well. But until I see you next time, good luck, play well.